Wildcats. Today we're looking at journal page 41, factoring and completing the square. Solve quadratic functions by factoring or completing the square steps. Step 1, factor the equation. Step 2, if the equation is not factorable, then complete the square. Step 3, solve for x. Okay, so if you would, complete the notes. Okay, now notes complete, let's take a look at the examples. Okay, let me adjust the camera here. There we go. All right, and it's a little slanted, almost perfect. That's about as good as we're gonna get. All right. Solve each of the following by factoring. If unable to factor, then solve each by completing the square. Okay, example 1. So we're gonna factor using the reverse box method. So we know first term, last term, and we know these two terms have to combine to be negative 12x. Okay, so we need to find out all the combinations that multiply to give you 20 and combine to be the middle term. So we know that in order for this number to be positive and the middle number to be negative, we have to multiply two negative numbers. So we know that negative 1 times negative 20 is 20. Negative 2 times negative 10 is positive 20. Negative 3 doesn't work. Negative 4 times negative 5 is positive 20. And then negative 5 times negative 4 equals positive 20. Now, when you see the combination repeat itself, then you know you've gone through all the combinations. Now, we need to see which or if any of those will combine to be negative 12. Okay, so negative 1 minus 20 is negative 21. That doesn't work. Negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12. This is our combination, so those are our factors. Okay, well, we know that x times x makes x squared, and now we know that minus 2 and minus 10 are factors. So x times negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 10 times x is negative 10x. Negative 10x and negative 2x combined to be negative 12x, and then negative 10 times negative 2 is a positive 20. So the factors are x minus 2 and x minus 10. Okay. Now, it says to solve, so we need to set each of these equal to 0 and solve for x. So x minus 2 equal to 0, x minus 10 equal to 0. Well, we add 2 to both sides, so x equals 2, and add 10 to both sides, x equals 10. Okay. All right, example 2. Factor x squared minus 9x minus 2. So again, we're going to factor using the reverse box method. So we know first term, last term, and we know that the middle term has to equal negative 9x. Okay, so we need to find all the combinations that multiply to give you negative 2. So we know that negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, and then negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. Now we need to see if any of those combine to be negative 9. So negative 1 plus 2 is 1. That doesn't work. Negative 2 plus 1 equals negative 1. None of these combinations give you a negative 9x. So we can say that this is not factorable. Okay, so now we're going to need to factor using completing the square. Okay, so we start with x squared minus 9x and we're going to add 2 to both sides, so then that equals positive 2. And the reason we did that is because we just wanted to complete this portion, do the completing the square. Now to complete the square, we take the middle number divided by 2 and squared. So that's plus negative 9 divided by 2 squared. But if you add something to one side, you have to add the same thing to the other. So it's plus negative 9 divided by 2 squared. So then that's x squared minus 9x, okay? And then plus negative 9 divided by 2 squared, which is 20.25. Let's just check that with the calculator. So parentheses negative 9 divided by 2 squared, Control Enter, is 20.25, okay? So then that equals, well, if we add 2 to that, that'd be 22.25, okay? Now, we know that this is factored as parentheses equals 22.25. We know it's x and x, and we know that the factor term is negative 9 divided by 2. So negative 9 divided by 2, Control Enter, is negative 4.5. And we know this works because negative 4.5 and negative 4.5 combine to be negative 9, and they multiply to be 20.25. Okay? Okay. Well, now we can write this as x minus 4.5 squared equals 22.25. Now, to solve for x, we're going to take the square root of both sides. So then that's x. We know the square root unsquared is squared, so it's x minus 4.5 equals the square root of 22.25. Now, whenever you take the square root, remember it's plus or minus. Now, let's step is going to add 4.5 to both sides. So x equals 4.5 plus or minus the square root of 22.25. Okay, so go ahead and finish up example 2. All right. Now, in the instance of time, I've shown you example 1, the traditional factor when it is factorable. But really, what we're focusing on is solving when completing the square. Okay. So in essence of time, I'm just going to let you know that example 3 and example 4 aren't factorable when we're going to practice solving with completing the square. Okay. Now, we already have the 12 on this side, but before we complete the square, we need to divide 2 by both of these terms. So in essence, we're factoring out the 2, which leaves 1x squared plus 4x. We're going to leave space here for completing the square equals 12. Okay. And we know this works because 2 times 1x squared is 2x squared, and 2 times 4x is 8x. Okay, so we factor out the 2. Now we're going to complete the square. So we take the middle number, divide it by 2, and square it. Okay, but if you add something to one side, you have to add the other. But remember, not just adding 4 divided by 2 squared, that's being multiplied by 2. So it's plus 2 times 4 divided by 2 squared. Okay, so then that's 2 times 1x squared plus 4x plus 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4 equals 12 plus, well, 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So then that's 2. We're going to factor this equals 20. Now we know x and x, and this is easy. 4 divided by 2 is 2, so that's plus 2 and plus 2. And we know this works because 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. So now we have 2 times x plus 2 squared equals 20. We're going to divide both sides by 2, so x plus 2 squared equals 10. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Well, the square root unsquares the square, so you'll have with x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 10. Then all we have to do is subtract 2 from both sides, so x equals, and let me leave space. It's not wrong to put it there, but I want to leave space between the work here and our answer. So x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 10. Okay. So go ahead and finish up example 3. All right, let's take a look at example 4. Okay. Now here, in order to complete the square, we need the x squared and the x on the same side. And we're going to leave the 27 on the right. So we're going to subtract 24x from both sides. So that's 3x squared minus 24x equals 27. Remember, we want to leave space for completing the square. Just like in example 3, we want to divide both of these by 3. So that leaves 3 times 1x squared, because 3 divided by 3 is 1, minus 8x, because 24 divided by 3 is 8. Again, leaving space for completing the square. So now we need to complete the square. We're going to take the middle term divided by 2 and square it. And sorry, that's a little hard to read. Let me try writing that again. Okay. Now, but if you add it to one side, you have to add it to the other. But you're not just adding it. Remember, you're multiplying it by 3 here. So it's plus 3 times -8 divided by 2 squared. Okay. So then that's 3 times 1x squared minus 8x plus, now -8 divided by 2 is -4 squared is plus 16 equals, that's 27 plus 3 times 16. Okay, so then that's 3 times parentheses equals 27 plus 3 times 16 is 75. Okay, and then this is x. We know the factor -8 divided by 2 is -4, so this is -4, -4, -4. So say -4 combines to be -8, and -4 times -4 is 16, so that works. So then that's 3 times x minus 4 squared equals 75. Okay. Now we need to divide both sides by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 25 divided by 3 is 25. So that's x minus 4 squared equals 25. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Well, the square root unsquares the square, so that's x minus 4 equals the square root of 25 is 5. So it's plus or minus 5. So then we add 4 to both sides. So x equals 4 plus or minus 5, which we can separate to say x equals 4 plus 5, which equals 9, and x equals 4 minus 5, which equals -1. So our answers are x equals 9 and x equals -1. And I don't know what happened with that 9, but let me try writing it. Okay. All right, if you would, finish up your examples and start working on your assignment, and have a wonderful Wildcat day.